everyone, welcome back to Nomad, and today I'll be doing my Cozyathon wrap-up. I participated in Cozyathon from the 1st to the 15th of February, and it is hosted by Sylvia K, who I link up here and down below. But be sure to check her out. It was such a fun readathon to do. So the readathon itself had various challenges, and I didn't get to read all the books I had on my TBR, but I did make a valiant effort. The first book I read and finished was The Nakano Thrift Shop by Hiromi Kawakami. This is a translated fiction, and it is a really interesting contemporary novel where it follows a young girl called Hitomi who works in the Nakano thrift shop. The thrift shop itself has some very interesting characters who work there. Mr. Nakano, his sister, and also Takeo, who's a very silent and very stoic male who Hitomi is a little interested in. So it is a linear collection of vignettes, if that makes sense. Different stories that focus on different items, elements, relationships, different things that revolve or happen within the Nakano thrift shop. There is a certain magic or magical realism that occurs within the thrift shop itself, and this is possessed by certain characters. Specifically, I believe Nakano's sister, she holds the most kind of sway over people, and she's a very passionate woman. I found this book quite interesting to read actually. I didn't get bored with it at all. It was very slow moving, and I think my previous understanding of Japanese culture fed greatly into my enjoyment of this book, but I was very much aware of focusing on the subtleties of movement, of action, of sound, of all things like that was very, very important within this book. So this one I gave about a 3.75 out of 5 stars. The second book I read during Cozyathon was The Wedding Date by Jasmine Guillory. This was a really interesting romance. It wasn't specifically within the romance genre, I would have to say. It has romantic elements, but is more in the fiction genre. This follows a classic meet cute where Drew and Alexa meet in an elevator in a hotel, and Drew, quite desperate to get a date for the wedding that he is attending of his ex-girlfriend and former best friend, he is desperate to find someone, and so he asks her on a whim, and she accepts because he's really cute and she wants to take a chance to actually be adventurous. It is a really cute romance story within themselves. However, I found issue that there wasn't any development of their backstory. There was snippets of showing them how they were motivated through their history, through their backstory, and what motivated them to do certain things, but there wasn't a lot of interaction with their families and friends, so I felt it was quite an isolated romance in itself, and it was almost awkward at times when it did introduce that kind of other element. So whilst it was quite a fun romance, I still think the plot and the character arcs could have been a little bit more developed, and it would have been a lot higher on the score ratings for me, but in the end I gave it a 3.5 out of 5. The third book I managed to complete during Cozyathon was Happiness for Humans by PZ Ryzen. This one follows Jen, who is working and chatting to a new developing software AI called Aiden to develop his conversation interface. And Aiden has managed to escape the 6 boxes of storage and computer storage that he is in London onto the internet. So he finds Jen utterly fascinating, so he follows her around, only to find that Jen is dumped by her absolutely horrid boyfriend. So after witnessing such a horrible breakup, Aiden decides to find someone for Jen, and that is his entire goal, to match her up with Mr. Right. And I have to say, this was an absolutely hilarious book. I was laughing constantly. I think the fact that Aiden is described as having a slight Welsh accent as well, I could instantly hear all his sayings and things in the Welsh accent. I think I'll have to check out the audiobook, because if they do the accents correctly, it will be absolutely hilarious. I did have issue with some of the AIs. I did get a little bit bored after a while, because the other 2 AIs that are introduced into this, they're not as diverse as Aiden. Aiden is a very well-rounded character for an AI, but the other 2 I don't think are as developed. Secondly, a little bit later in the book, there are certain elements that cause the romance to be forestalled and divert off in different areas. Whilst this did seem quite realistic in how the characters responded to that event, I did get quite frustrated with it because it almost seemed as if they were just creating diversions. I would have liked to see how the romance would have played out within that capacity. Otherwise, I thought this is a very well delivered book. The humour was very much spot on, very well delivered. I did wish there was a little bit more of Aiden in the later chapters, but he made up for it in the end, and he is such a fantastic AI character. He was just so refreshing. The next thing that I did as part of Cozyathon was rewatch Beauty and the Beast. Now I ended up watching the live action movie instead of the cartoon itself, which is also produced by Disney, so I thought that was completely within the parameters of the challenge. I had an absolute ball of a time watching that again. I love the musical. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I even like the new songs they added to the live action. I think one of my favourites is the Beast song because you get to have more of his emotion and feeling coming into the movie itself. However, that challenge was all about reading a fairy tale book or a fairy tale retelling, and I chose Uprooted. I am still actually going with this one. I'm so close to finishing. I'm going to hold my opinions to right to the end, but from my preliminary reports and what most people said in my TBR announcement at the beginning of Cozyathon, I had a very low expectation because there were lots of reports of people loving it, people hating it, people feeling entirely underwhelmed by this book, and I think the cover doesn't help being so beautiful. But from what I read at the very beginning and going into the story itself, it reminds me of a very dark and very early fairy tale. It doesn't base itself on any of the highly romanticized fairy tales of the 1700s. This one feels very much rooted in the very early fairy tales that I have read in the 1500s, very grim style fairy tales. So this one feels quite authentic and quite dark in its tone. But otherwise, all I'm going to say is that I'm thoroughly enjoying it. So the other book that I had down on my Cozyathon TBR is The Kitchen House by Kathleen Grissom. I have managed to start this one. I am just finished chapter 5 up to chapter 6. It is about a young Irish girl who gets transported over to America to work within a household, and she becomes very good friends with the African American slaves who work within the house as well. So far all I can say is that the writing is quite well delivered. It is a very easy read to sink into, and the historical fiction elements are being quite well upheld, so it doesn't feel out of place. Lastly, I did mention in my TBR that I will be buddy reading The First 15 Lives of Harry August by Claire North with my book club. I am a little way into this, but I've mainly been focusing on the other Cozyathon challenges, and the book club meeting isn't until later in February, so I still have time to finish this one off. But so far I'm really enjoying it. It's a little bit hard to sink into it because when Harry August is very much in the middle of his lives, that it almost seems disconcerting and you have to catch up with what is going on. But otherwise you get into a very smooth flow and transition into this book. Okay, so I hope you have enjoyed watching my Instagram stories Cozyathon updates and any of the pictures that I've been posting, and I hope you enjoyed my quick mini review wrap-ups of these books. Let me know down below if you'd like to read any of these books and if you want to talk about them a little bit more, or what is your favourite cozy romance book to read. So I'll see you next time. Happy reading. Bye!